Commander Vextella stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the gentle beeping of computers. Her ship, the Sovereign's Will, was one of the largest vessels in the Zephyrian fleet. It was over 2 miles long and carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The Kepler 442 system was peaceful today. 3 planets circled the yellow star, and one of them was home to a new Zephyrian colony. The colonists had been there for only 5 years, but they were doing well. They had built cities, farms, and mining stations. Trade ships came and went every few days, carrying goods to other parts of the galaxy. Vextella had been patrolling this area for 6 months. It was not exciting work, but it was important. The Kepler 442 system sat at the crossing of 3 major trade routes. Ships from dozens of different alien races passed through here every day. Most of them were friendly, but pirates sometimes tried to attack the merchant vessels. The commander was tall, even for a Zephyrian. Her skin was blue-green and covered with small scales that caught the light from the bridge displays. Her large eyes could see much better than human eyes, and her 4 arms made her very good at operating the complex control panels on her ship. She had been in the Zephyrian Navy for 30 years and had fought in many battles. Today felt different, though. Her sensors had been picking up strange readings for the past hour. Something was coming toward their system through hyperspace. The computer said it would arrive soon. "Commander," called out her sensor officer, a young Zephyrian named Coulter. "We have a ship dropping out of hyperspace. It's about 50,000 miles away from us." Vextella turned to look at the main display screen. A new dot appeared on the tactical map, showing the position of the unknown vessel. She frowned as she studied the readings. "What kind of ship is it?" she asked. Coulter worked at his console. For a moment, his 4 hands dancing across the controls. "It's strange, Commander. The ship is much smaller than our frigates. The hull appears to be made of simple metal alloys. The design is very basic. It looks like it was built by a species that just learned how to travel between stars. Weapons?" Vextella wanted to know. "I can detect some energy signatures that might be weapons, but they are very weak. This ship could not hurt even our smallest patrol boat." Vextella relaxed a little. New species discovered hyperspace travel every few years. Most of them were excited and curious about the galaxy, but they were also primitive and harmless. The Zephyrian Confederation had procedures for dealing with such contacts. "Are they sending any messages?" she asked. Communications Officer Reven looked up from her station. "Yes, Commander. They are broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The message is in very simple galactic standard. I will put it on the main speakers." A voice filled the bridge. It sounded strange, with odd tones and pronunciation that was not quite right. "Greetings. We are explorers from Terra. We seek peaceful contact and trade opportunities. Please respond if you can understand this message." Several officers on the bridge made soft clicking sounds with their mouths. This was how Zephyrians laughed. The aliens sounded so polite and hopeful. It reminded Vextella of children asking for permission to play in the garden. "Terra," she said thoughtfully. "I have never heard of that world. Computer, search the database for any reference to a planet called Terra or a species that calls itself Terran." The ship's computer made soft humming sounds as it searched through millions of records. After a few seconds, it responded in its calm, mechanical voice. "No records found for Terra or Terrans in the Galactic database." This was not unusual. There were thousands of worlds in the galaxy, and new ones were discovered all the time. Many primitive species had never made contact with galactic civilization before. "What does their ship look like?" Vextella asked. The main viewing screen changed to show the alien vessel. Vextella studied it carefully. The ship was indeed small, maybe 300 feet long. Its hull was gray metal with some kind of numbers and symbols painted on the side. The design was very simple and blocky, without the smooth curves that advanced shipbuilders preferred. Parts of it looked like they had been welded together by hand. "It looks like a cargo ship," said Tactical Officer McSqueen. See those large sections in the middle? They are probably storage areas. And those small sections at the back are likely the engines. Very primitive, agreed another officer. Look at those exhaust ports. They are using chemical rockets for maneuvering. We stopped using those 500 years ago. Vexthala nodded. The aliens were clearly new to space travel. Their ship looked like something a student might build in engineering school. It was functional but crude. Commander, Revan called out, they are sending another message. Let me hear it. The strange voice came through the speakers again. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Colonial Service vessel Indomitable. We have detected your ships and would be honored to speak with you. We bring greetings from the people of Terra and hope to learn about your civilization. Terran Colonial Service, Vexthala repeated. So they have some kind of government organization for space exploration. That shows they are at least somewhat organized. She made her decision quickly. First contact with a new species was always interesting, and it would be good for her career if she handled it well. The aliens seemed harmless and polite. There was no danger in talking to them. Revan, open a channel to their ship. Channel. Open, Commander. Vexthala stepped forward and spoke in her most official voice. Terran vessel Indomitable, this is Commander Vexthala of the Zephyrian Confederation ship. Sovereign's Will, we welcome you to the Kepler 442 system. We are pleased to make contact with your species. There was a pause, then the alien voice responded. Commander Vexthala, this is Captain Chun. We are grateful for your welcome. This is our first contact with any alien civilization, and we are very excited to meet you. First contact, whispered Coulter. They really are primitive. Vexthala continued speaking to the aliens. Captain Chin, we would be happy to tell you about galactic civilization and how your species might join the community of worlds. Would you be willing to meet with us in person? Another pause. We would be very honored to meet with you, Commander. Should we come to your ship? That would be acceptable. We will send you docking instructions. As Revan transmitted the docking procedures, Vexthala turned to her staff. Prepare the formal meeting chamber. Use the standard first contact protocols. And make sure our translators are working properly. Their galactic standard is not very good. What kind of reception should we prepare? Asteroid Felinor. Vexthala thought for a moment. Something impressive but not threatening? These aliens need to understand that we are advanced and powerful, but also friendly. Bring out the ceremonial guard, but keep their weapons powered down, and prepare the standard protection treaty documents. The protection treaty was something the Zephyrian Confederation offered to all primitive species. It was a generous agreement that provided new species with advanced technology, protection from pirates and hostile aliens, and access to galactic trade routes. In exchange, the new species would provide raw materials, agricultural products, and workers for Zephyrian projects. Most primitive species were eager to sign such treaties. Who would not want protection and advanced technology? The Zephyrians had signed similar agreements with over 40 different species in the past 2 centuries. It was a system that worked well for everyone. How long until they dock? Vexthala asked. About 30 minutes, Commander. Vexthala used the time to study the files on first contact procedures. She had done this before, but each new species was different. Some were excited and curious, others were nervous and suspicious. Few had been hostile, but those cases were rare. Most primitive species quickly realized that cooperation with advanced civilizations was in their best interests. The Terrans seemed to fall into the first category. Their messages had been polite and respectful. They had not made any demands or threats. They appeared to understand that they were the newcomers in this situation. When the alien ship reached the docking bay, Vexthala was ready. She had changed into her formal uniform, which was covered with medals and decorations that showed her rank and achievements. The meeting chamber had been prepared with comfortable chairs and a large table covered with star charts and treaty. Documents, Commander, announced Felinor. The aliens have docked. Security reports that 3 of them are coming aboard. They are wearing some kind of environmental suits. Environmental suits? Vextela was surprised. Our atmosphere should be safe for most oxygen-breathing species. They may be being cautious, Commander, or perhaps their species has special requirements. This made sense. Many alien species needed different atmospheric mixtures or protection from certain types of radiation. The Zephyrians always tried to make their guests comfortable. A few minutes later, the doors to the meeting chamber opened. 3 figures in bulky white suits walked in, led by Vextela's security chief. The suits covered their entire bodies, and their faces were hidden behind reflective helmets. The aliens moved in an interesting way. They seemed to be studying everything around them, taking in details of the room and the equipment. Their heads turned frequently as if they were recording or analyzing what they saw. One of them stepped forward and spoke. The voice was muffled by the helmet, but the translation system made it clear. Commander Vextela, I am Captain Sarah Chun. Thank you for welcoming us aboard your ship. These are my officers, Lieutenant Commander Park and Science Officer Rodriguez. Vextela stood and gave a formal bow. Captain Chun, welcome to the Sovereign's Will. Please sit down. We have much to discuss. The humans took their seats carefully. Even through their suits, Vextela could tell they were smaller than Zephyrians. They seemed to be studying the room and its contents with great interest. Captain Chun, Vextela began, you said this is your first contact with alien civilization. How did your species develop hyperspace travel without meeting other races? Terra is located in a relatively empty region of space, Captain Chun replied. We had no idea that so many other intelligent species existed until we developed our first hyperspace engines a few years ago. We have been exploring carefully, looking for signs of other civilizations. And now you have found us, Vextela said with satisfaction. This is a great day for both our species. The galaxy is a large and sometimes dangerous place, but it is also full of opportunities for those who know how to take advantage of them. She gestured to the star charts on the table. These maps show the major trade routes and the territories of the most important civilizations. As you can see, space is divided among many different confederations, hegemonies, and collectives. Each group controls hundreds or thousands of star systems. Captain Chun leaned forward to study the maps. Fascinating. How many different species are there? Over 300 that we know of, Vextela replied proudly. The Zephyrian Confederation alone includes 47 different species. We provide protection and technology to our member worlds, and they contribute their unique skills and resources to our common prosperity. It sounds like a very organized system, Chun said. How does a new species like ours fit into this structure? Vextela smiled, showing her sharp teeth. This was exactly the question she had been hoping for. That is an excellent question, Captain Chun. The galaxy can be a dangerous place for species that try to go it alone. There are pirates, hostile aliens, and many other threats. But species that join established confederations can enjoy protection and prosperity. She picked up one of the documents from the table. This is a standard protection treaty. It outlines how new species can become members of the Zephyrian Confederation. We provide military protection, advanced technology, and access to galactic markets. In return, member species contribute resources and labor to our common projects. Captain Shane took the document and appeared to study it through her helmet. This is very generous of you. What kinds of resources and labor would Terra be expected to provide? Nothing too difficult, Vextela assured her. Perhaps mining operations, agricultural products, or workers for construction projects. Every species contributes what they do best. It is a fair system that has worked well for centuries. The human was quiet for a long moment, apparently reading through the treaty. Finally, she looked up. Commander, this is a lot of information to process. Would it be possible for us to take some time to study this proposal and consult with our government on Terra? Vextela was pleased. The humans were being sensible. Many primitive species tried to make hasty decisions in these situations, but the smart ones took time to consider their options. Of course, Captain Chun, take all the time you need. These are important decisions that should not be rushed. As the meeting continued, Vexthala found herself liking these humans more and more. They asked intelligent questions about galactic civilization, trade procedures, and defense arrangements. They seemed genuinely interested in learning and participating in the wider community of worlds. When the meeting ended, Captain Chun thanked Vexthala for her time and hospitality. The three humans returned to their ship, taking copies of the treaty documents with them. As she watched their small vessel move away from her ship, Vexthala felt satisfied with the day's work. The humans seemed like exactly the kind of species that would benefit from Zephyrian protection. They were intelligent but primitive, organized but not threatening. In a few days, they would probably return with signed treaties. Eager to join galactic civilization, she had no idea how wrong she was. Captain Sarah Chun sat in the small meeting room aboard the Terran ship Indomitable. The room was cramped compared to the spacious chambers on the Zephyrian vessel, but it served its purpose. Around the table sat her three most trusted officers: Lieutenant Commander Park, Science Officer Rodriguez, and Intelligence Specialist Hayes. Chun had removed her environmental suit after returning from the alien ship. She was a woman in her early 40s with short black hair and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. Her uniform was simple and practical, very different from the elaborate decorations worn by the Zephyrian commander. "Well, what do you think?" Chun asked her team. Lieutenant Commander Park spoke first. He was a tall man with steady hands and a calm voice. "They are exactly what the advance report said they would be. Arrogant, condescending, and completely convinced of their own superiority." "The protection treaty is interesting," added Rodriguez, a woman with graying hair and thick glasses. "It is basically a slavery contract dressed up in fancy language. They provide some technology and protection, while the member species gives them everything valuable they own." Hayes, the youngest member of the team, looked angry. "Did you see how they talked to us? Like we were children who needed adults to take care of us. They think we are completely helpless." Chun nodded slowly. "That is exactly what we want them to think. The longer they believe we are primitive and harmless, the more information we can gather." She turned to Rodriguez. "What did you learn from their ship systems while we were there?" Rodriguez smiled and pulled out a small device. "Quite a lot. Actually, their security is terrible. They never imagined that primitive aliens might have advanced scanning equipment hidden in their environmental suits. I was able to map most of their computer networks and download significant amounts of data." "Excellent. What kind of data?" "Fleet positions, patrol schedules, defensive arrangements for this system, and a lot of information about their ongoing conflicts with other alien powers. It seems the Zephyrians are fighting wars on multiple fronts." Chun leaned forward with interest. "Tell me more about these conflicts." Rodriguez consulted her notes. "They are currently engaged in territorial disputes with two other major powers. The hegemony of Keth controls the systems to the north, and the Crystalline Collective dominates the eastern regions. All three groups have been fighting over border systems for over 200 years. 200 years? Park looked surprised. "That is a very long time for a war." "It is not really a war," Rodriguez explained. "More like a series of small battles and diplomatic incidents. None of the three powers is strong enough to defeat the others completely, so they just keep fighting over the same few systems again and again." Hayes added, "The casualty numbers are incredible. Millions of beings have died in these conflicts, and none of the sides has gained more than a few star systems. It is a complete waste of resources." Chun processed this information carefully. The intelligence reports from Terra had suggested that the local alien powers were not very efficient, but this was worse than expected. Any military force that could fight for 2 centuries without achieving decisive victory was probably not very good at warfare. "What about their technology?" she asked. "Mixed results," Rodriguez replied. "Some of their systems are quite advanced, especially their hyperspace engines and energy weapons. But their tactics and strategic thinking appear to be very outdated. They build huge, slow ships designed for long battles of attrition." "Attrition warfare," Chun mused. That explains the 200-year conflicts. They just keep throwing ships at each other until one side gets tired and gives up. Exactly. And their defensive strategies are completely predictable. They group their fleets around major worlds and wait for enemies to attack. Very passive and reactive. Chun stood up and walked to the small window that looked out into space. In the distance, she could see the lights of the Zephyrian fleet. 5 large ships and a dozen smaller vessels, all positioned in a standard defensive formation. They have no idea what modern warfare looks like, she said quietly. They are still fighting the same way their ancestors did centuries ago. Park cleared his throat. Captain, what are your orders? Should we proceed with the original mission plan? June turned back to her officers. Not yet. We need more information first. The Zephyrians are clearly planning to offer us their protection treaty, and I want to see exactly how they present it. The more we understand about their diplomatic methods, the better we can predict how they will react to other species. She sat back down at the table. Besides, playing the role of grateful primitives for a few more days will not hurt us. It gives our other ships more time to get into position. Hayes looked confused. Other ships, Captain? Chun smiled. Did you really think Terra would send just one ship to make first contact with an unknown alien power? The Indomitable is just the advanced scout. The rest of Task Force Omega is currently moving into position throughout this system. How many ships are we talking about? Park wanted to know. Enough, Chun replied simply. But they are all using stealth systems and holographic camouflage. To the Zephyrians, they will look like harmless merchant vessels and research ships. By the time we reveal our true capabilities, it will be too late for them to respond effectively. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. A classic misdirection strategy. Make the enemy underestimate your forces while you gather intelligence and achieve tactical superiority. Exactly. The Zephyrians think they are dealing with a single primitive ship crewed by curious explorers. They have no idea that they are facing a full colonial marine task force equipped with the most advanced weapons Terra has ever built. The next morning, Chun received a message from Commander Vextella, inviting her to return to the Zephyrian flagship for more detailed discussions. Chun accepted immediately. Bringing the same team of officers with her, the meeting chamber on the Sovereign's will had been prepared even more elaborately than before. The table was covered with star charts, technical manuals, and several copies of the Protection Treaty. Around the room stood 6 Zephyrian guards in ceremonial armor, their weapons clearly visible but not threatening. Commander Vextella greeted them warmly. Captain Chun, welcome back. I hope you had time to study the materials we provided yesterday. We did, Commander. My officers and I spent many hours reviewing the Protection Treaty and the information about galactic civilization. It is all very impressive. Vextella gestured for them to sit down. I am glad you find it interesting. Today, I would like to discuss the practical details of how Terra might join the Zephyrian Confederation. Chun nodded politely. We are very interested in learning more. The Zephyrian commander activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems glowed in different colors, representing the territories of various alien powers. As you can see, Vextella began, the galaxy is divided among many different groups. The blue systems belong to the Zephyrian Confederation. We control over 600 star systems and protect 47 different species. She pointed to other regions of the map. The red systems are controlled by the hegemony of Keth, and the green ones belong to the Crystalline Collective. These are our main rivals in this part of the galaxy. June studied the map carefully. It looks like you are surrounded by potential enemies. That is why the Protection Treaty is so important, Vextella explained. No single species can survive alone in such a dangerous environment. But together, we are strong enough to defend ourselves and prosper. She touched a control, and the map zoomed in to show the local region around the Kepler 442 system. Terra would be located somewhere in this area, correct? June pointed to a system about 50 light-years away. Yes, approximately there, Vextella nodded. Excellent. That location would give us a useful outpost for monitoring hegemony activities in that sector. Your world would be well protected, and Terra could serve as a base for our patrol fleets. What kind of protection would you provide? Park asked. Complete military protection, Vextala replied proudly. Any species that threatens a Confederation member would face the full might of our fleet. We have over 3,000 warships, including 50 dreadnoughts like this one. Hayes looked impressed. 3,000 ships? That is a very large fleet, it is indeed. And with Terra's membership, we would station a permanent patrol force in your system. Perhaps 20 ships initially, with more if needed. Chun appeared to consider this. What would Terra be expected to contribute in return? Vextala's expression became more businesslike. Nothing too difficult. Terra would provide raw materials for our shipyards, agricultural products for our worlds that focus on manufacturing, and workers for various projects throughout the Confederation. What kinds of raw materials? Rodriguez wanted to know. Metals, crystals, radioactive elements for our power systems. Your world probably has large reserves of such materials that you are not using yet, and agricultural products. Food crops, luxury items, exotic spices. Many of our industrial worlds cannot grow their own food, so they depend on agricultural worlds to feed their populations. Chun frowned slightly. How much food would Terra need to provide? Perhaps 30% of your total agricultural output, Vextala said casually. That would leave plenty for your own population. Park looked concerned. 30% seems like quite a lot for a new member. Vextala waved one of her 4 hands dismissively. It may seem like much now, but remember that you would receive advanced farming technology in return. Zephyrian agricultural methods could increase your crop yields by 3 or 4 times. You would actually produce much more food than before, even after providing your contribution to the Confederation. Shun nodded slowly. And the workers you mentioned? Various construction projects, mining operations, maintenance work on our ships and stations. Perhaps 5% of your adult population initially. Hayes did some quick mental calculations. 5% of Terra's population is about 50 million people. Is that a problem? Vextala asked. They would be well treated and paid fair wages. Many would learn valuable skills that they could bring back to Terra. Chun was quiet for a moment, apparently thinking. Commander, these are very generous offers, but they represent major commitments for Terra. Our government would need to study all the details carefully before making such important decisions. Of course, Vextala replied. But I should mention that there are some time pressures involved. Time pressures? Vextala's expression became more serious. The galactic situation is always changing. Right now, Terra is in unclaimed space, which means any of the major powers could decide to expand into your region. If Terra is not under Confederation protection, you could find yourselves facing demands from the hegemony or the collective. She paused for effect. And I can assure you that those powers are much less generous than we are. The hegemony simply conquers primitive species and turns them into slave worlds. The collective absorbs other species into their hive mind, destroying their individual cultures completely. Chun looked alarmed. That sounds terrible. It is. That is why time is important. The longer Terra remains unprotected, the greater the risk that one of our enemies will discover your world and claim it for themselves. Park leaned forward. How much time do we have? It is hard to say. Months, perhaps a year at most. The hegemony has been expanding in this direction, and their scout ships could reach Terra's region at any time. Chun stood up and walked to the holographic map. She studied it for several minutes, asking detailed questions about patrol routes, communication systems, and defensive strategies. Vextala answered all her questions freely, clearly believing that the primitive humans needed to understand how galactic politics worked. This is all very complex, Chun said finally. I can see why Terra would benefit from Confederation protection. But our government will need detailed reports about everything we have learned here. How long will that take? Vextala asked. At least 48 hours. We need to send detailed messages back to Terra and wait for instructions from our leaders. Vextella looked disappointed but nodded. Very well, but I hope Terra will not delay too long. Every day of delay increases the risk to your world. As the meeting ended, Chin thanked the Zephyrian commander for her patience and information. The humans returned to their ship, carrying data chips with detailed information about the Protection Treaty and galactic politics. Once they were safely back aboard the Indomitable, Chun called her officers together again. Well? She asked. Rodriguez shook her head in amazement. They told us everything. Fleet positions, defensive strategies, resource requirements, political weaknesses. It is like they want us to know how to defeat them. They think we are too primitive to understand the military significance of what they are telling us, Park observed. Hayes was looking at his notes. Did you hear what she said? About Terra providing 50 million workers? That is not a protection treaty, it is a blueprint for economic exploitation? Chun nodded grimly. And 30% of our agricultural output would mean starvation for millions of humans. They are not offering protection, they are planning to strip mine our entire civilization. She walked to the communications console. Rodriguez, send a message to Task Force Omega, tell them to accelerate their deployment schedule. I want all ships in position within 24 hours. Yes. Captain, what about our response to the Zephyrians? Shun smiled coldly. We will give them an answer, just not the one they are expecting. It is time to show these aliens what humanity is really capable of. Outside the window, more lights appeared in the darkness of space as additional human ships began arriving in the system. To the Zephyrians, they looked like harmless merchant vessels and research ships. They had no idea that each new arrival was actually a heavily armed warship, moving into position for what would become the most one-sided battle in galactic history. Tactical analyst Cretan sat at his workstation aboard the Sovereign's Will, staring at the data streams flowing across his multiple display screens. As one of the youngest officers on the ship, he often drew the boring assignments like monitoring sensor readings and tracking ship movements. Most days, nothing interesting happened in the Kepler 442 system. Today was different, though. More human ships had been arriving throughout the past day, and something about them bothered him. Cretan was good with numbers and patterns. His brain worked differently than most Zephyrians, which made him excellent at spotting things that others missed. The first thing that caught his attention was the way the human ships moved. When primitive species traveled through space, their formations were usually random and disorganized. They had not learned proper fleet tactics yet, so their ships wandered around like lost children, but these human ships were different. They appeared to be moving randomly, but when Cretan plotted their positions on his tactical display, he noticed something interesting. Despite looking scattered and unorganized, the ships were actually positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire and mutual defensive support. Computer, he said quietly, analyze the current positions of all human vessels in the system. Calculate optimal firing solutions and defensive coverage patterns. The computer hummed for a few seconds, then displayed its results. Cretan's large eyes widened as he studied the data. The human ships were positioned almost perfectly for a coordinated attack. Every major Zephyrian vessel was covered by at least 3 different firing angles. If the humans were enemies, they could not have chosen better positions, but that was impossible. These were primitive explorers and merchants, not military strategists. They probably did not even understand basic space tactics. Cretan tried. A different approach? Computer, compare the energy signatures of the human vessels with known ship classifications in the Galactic database. More data appeared on his screens. This was even more confusing. The human ships were broadcasting energy signatures that matched simple cargo haulers and research vessels. But when Cretan looked more closely at the readings, he noticed tiny inconsistencies. The power levels were too stable for primitive fusion reactors. The engine emissions showed traces of exotic matter that only advanced civilizations could produce. And the electromagnetic signatures suggested the presence of sophisticated scanning equipment far beyond What merchant ships would normally carry? That is strange, Cretan muttered to himself. He had never seen readings quite like these before. He decided to run a deeper analysis on the largest human ship, the one that had arrived second. According to its identification signals, it was called the Merchant Vessel Prosperity and was carrying agricultural products for trade. The computer scanned the ship with passive sensors, trying to penetrate its hull and examine its internal structure. What it found made no sense at all. The ship's cargo bays were the right size and shape for agricultural storage, but they were almost empty. Instead of crops and livestock, the scanning equipment detected complex machinery and what appeared to be military equipment. There were also large empty spaces that could be weapons bays, though no weapons were currently visible. Most puzzling of all, the ship's mass readings did not match its apparent size. According to the sensors, the vessel was nearly twice as heavy as it should be for its dimensions. That suggested it had hidden compartments or a much thicker hull than it appeared to have. Cretan sat back in his chair, thinking hard. There were several possible explanations for these readings. The humans might have more advanced technology than they claimed. Or their ships might be designed for multiple purposes. Or the Zephyrian sensors might be malfunctioning. He decided to check the other human vessels. One by one, he scanned each ship in the system. The results were similar every time. The ships looked primitive and harmless, but their energy signatures and mass readings suggested they were much more advanced than they appeared. By the time he finished his analysis, Cretan was deeply worried. He had found at least a dozen major inconsistencies in the human fleet. Taken individually, each one could be explained away, but together they painted a picture that made him very uncomfortable. He stood up and walked across the bridge to the command station where Commander Vextella was reviewing reports from the diplomatic meetings. "Commander," he said hesitantly, "I need to show you something." Vextella looked up from her data pad. "What is it, Cretan?" "It is about the human ships, Commander. I have been analyzing their positions and energy signatures, and I found some unusual readings." "Unusual how?" Cretan activated the main tactical display and showed her the formation patterns he had discovered. "Look at their positions, Commander. They appear random, but they actually provide optimal tactical coverage of our fleet." Vexthala studied the display for a moment, then shrugged. "Coincidence. Primitive species sometimes stumble into decent formations by accident." "Perhaps, Commander, but there are other issues." Cretan switched to the energy signature analysis. "Their ships are broadcasting power readings consistent with primitive technology, but the detailed scans show inconsistencies," he pointed to several data streams on the screen. "These exotic matter traces, the electromagnetic signatures, the mass readings that do not match the apparent hull sizes. Taken together, they suggest the human ships are not what they claim to be." Vexthala frowned as she studied the data. "What are you suggesting, analyst?" "I'm not sure, Commander. But I think we should be more careful around these humans. Something about their fleet does not add up." The commander was quiet for a long moment, considering what she had been shown. Finally, she shook her head. "Cretan, you are overthinking this. Yes, there are some unusual readings, but that is normal when dealing with unfamiliar technology. Every species builds their ships differently." She gestured toward the communication logs from the diplomatic meetings. "I have been talking with these humans for 2 days. They are polite, curious, and completely harmless. Captain Chen is obviously intelligent, but she is also clearly overwhelmed by the complexity of galactic civilization." "But Commander, the tactical formations are meaningless," Vexthala interrupted. "Even if the humans positioned their ships perfectly for an attack, what could they possibly do to us? Their most powerful vessel is smaller than our frigates. Their weapons are primitive chemical rockets and basic energy projectors. They could not hurt our shields even if they tried." Cretan wanted to argue further, but he could see that the commander had made up her mind. In Zephyrian culture, junior officers did not contradict their superiors without very strong evidence, and he had to admit that his concerns were based mostly on suspicious patterns rather than concrete proof. Yes, Commander, he said finally. Good, now return to your station and continue monitoring the system. But stop looking for problems that do not exist. As Cretan walked back to his workstation, he felt frustrated and worried. His analytical mind told him that something was very wrong with the human fleet, but he could not prove it. And even if he could, would anyone listen to him? Meanwhile, on the other side of the bridge, Communications Officer Revan was having her own concerns. She had been monitoring all transmissions between the human ships, hoping to learn more about their language and culture. What she found was puzzling. The humans were using sophisticated encryption methods for their internal communications. That was unusual for a primitive species that had supposedly just developed hyperspace travel. More concerning was the content of the few messages she had been able to decode. Instead of discussing trade goods or exploration plans, the humans seemed to be coordinating something they called deployment schedules and tactical assessments. Those sounded like military terms, not the language of peaceful merchants and explorers. Revan had also noticed that the human ships were conducting very detailed scans of the Zephyrian fleet, much more detailed than would be needed for simple scientific curiosity. It was almost as if they were mapping weapon systems and defensive capabilities. She considered reporting these observations to Commander Vextella, but decided against it. The commander seemed convinced that the humans were harmless primitives, and Revan did not want to appear paranoid or incompetent. Instead, she decided to keep monitoring the human communications more closely. If she could decode more of their messages, perhaps she would find something concrete enough to justify her concerns. 2 days after the first diplomatic meeting, Captain Chen sent a message requesting another conference with Commander Vextella. She said that Terra had received the information about the protection treaty and was ready to provide an official response. Vextella was pleased. She had expected the humans to accept the treaty eagerly, and she looked forward to welcoming another species into the Confederation. The signing ceremony would be good for her career, and Terra would provide useful resources for the ongoing conflicts with the hegemony and the collective. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning. Chin and her usual team of officers arrived at the appointed time, still wearing their environmental suits. They seemed more confident than before, walking with purpose and speaking more directly. Commander Vextella, Chun said as she entered the meeting chamber, thank you for your patience while we consulted with our government. Terra has carefully considered your generous offer. Excellent, Vextella replied. I am sure your leaders recognize the benefits of Confederation membership. Chin sat down at the conference table, but she did not lean forward eagerly as she had in previous meetings. Instead, she sat back in her chair with her hands folded, looking more like a military officer than a nervous explorer. Commander, before we discuss Terra's response, I would like to clarify a few things about our previous conversations. Of course, what would you like to know? You mentioned that Terra would be expected to provide 30% of our agricultural output to the Confederation. Is that correct? Yes, that is the standard contribution for agricultural worlds. And 50 million workers for various projects? Approximately, yes. And Terra would also provide raw materials, including metals and radioactive elements for your power systems? Vextella nodded. These contributions would ensure Terra's protection and access to advanced technology. Chun was quiet for a moment, then looked directly at the Zephyrian commander. What you are describing is not a protection treaty, Commander. It is economic colonization. Vextella was taken aback by the blunt statement. I do not understand what you mean. You want us to give you 30% of our food, 50 million of our people, and all of our valuable minerals. In return, you offer us some technology and protection from enemies that we have never encountered. This is not a partnership between equals. It is the relationship between a master and a servant. The Zephyrian commander felt a flash of anger. Captain Chen, you are being ungrateful. The Confederation is offering your primitive species the chance to join galactic civilization. Without our protection, Terra will be conquered by the hegemony or absorbed by the collective. Chun stood up slowly. I see. And if we refuse your generous offer? Then Terra will remain unprotected and vulnerable. The galaxy is a dangerous place for species that try to survive alone. Is that a threat, Commander? Vexthala realized that the conversation had taken an unexpected turn. She had expected grateful acceptance, not pointed questions and accusations. It is not a threat, Captain. It is simply reality. Chun nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for clarifying your position, Commander. Now let me clarify ours. She gestured to her officers, who stood up with military precision. Their posture and movements were no longer those of curious explorers. They looked like soldiers preparing for battle. Commander Vexthala, Chun said in a voice that had become cold and professional, I should inform you that I have been less than completely honest about our mission here. What do you mean? We are not explorers seeking peaceful contact and trade opportunities. We are an advanced reconnaissance unit of the Terran Colonial Marines, sent to evaluate potential threats to human expansion in this sector. The meeting chamber fell silent. Vexthala stared at the humans, trying to process what she had just heard. Over the past 4 days, Chun continued, we have conducted comprehensive intelligence gathering operations against your fleet and your civilization. We have analyzed your weapons, your tactics, your political structure, and your military capabilities. She paused, consulting a datapad that had appeared in her hand. We have also monitored your ongoing conflicts with the hegemony of Keth and the Crystalline Collective. Your species has been engaged in these. The bridge of the Sovereign's will erupted into chaos as alarms blared and warning lights flashed red across every control panel. Officers shouted orders and questions while their instruments showed readings that should have been impossible, Commander. Vexthala stood frozen in the meeting chamber, staring at Captain Chun. The human woman no longer looked like a nervous explorer seeking guidance from superior aliens. Her posture was straight and confident, her eyes cold and calculating. She looked like what she really was, a predator who had been studying her prey. This cannot be happening, Vexthala whispered. Your ships are primitive. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Chun tilted her head slightly, like a teacher correcting a slow student. Commander, everything you think you know about human technology is wrong. We showed you exactly what we wanted you to see. On the tactical displays, around the bridge, the transformation of the human fleet continued. What had appeared to be a small merchant vessel called the Prosperity was now revealed as a massive battlecruiser, nearly as large as the Sovereign's will. Its hull bristled with weapon arrays that looked unlike anything in the Zephyrian database. Another ship that had identified itself as a research vessel was dropping its disguise to reveal sleek fighter bays and missile launchers. A third vessel, supposedly carrying agricultural supplies, was extending massive sensor arrays and what appeared to be some kind of energy cannon. Tactical analyst Cretan rushed into the meeting chamber, his face pale with fear. Commander, the human fleet is not what we thought. The mass readings, the energy signatures, everything was false. I can see that, Vexthala snapped, though her voice shook with shock. Chun watched the panic with calm interest. Analyst Cretan, is it not? You were the one asking questions about our ship formations and energy readings, were you not? Cretan stared at her in surprise. How do you know my name? We have been monitoring all communications on your ship since our first visit. Your concerns were quite perceptive, actually. You almost figured out what we were doing. She turned back to Vexthala. Unfortunately, your commander chose to ignore those warnings. That was a mistake. Vexthala tried to regain her composure. What do you want? If this is some kind of elaborate first contact procedure, you have made your point. Chun laughed. A sound without humor. Commander, this stopped being a first contact situation the moment you offered to enslave my species? Did you really think we would hand over 50 million of our people and 30% of our food production to aliens we had just met? That is the standard arrangement for new species joining galactic civilization. Exactly. And that tells us everything we need to know about galactic civilization. Chun began pacing around the meeting table, her movements controlled and purposeful. For the past 6 months, Terra has been conducting covert reconnaissance missions throughout this region of space. We have studied the Zephyrian Confederation, the hegemony of Keth, and the Crystalline Collective. She paused to look directly at Vexthela. Do you know what we found? 3 declining powers locked in pointless conflicts, using outdated tactics and primitive strategies. You have been fighting the same war for 200 years without achieving anything except massive casualties? Our military might is proven in battle, Vexthela protested weakly. Your military might is a joke, Chun replied bluntly. You build enormous ships designed for long-range bombardment and attrition warfare. You group your fleets in predictable formations around major worlds. Your logistics chains are vulnerable, your communication systems are easily intercepted, and your tactical doctrine has not changed in centuries. She gestured toward the tactical displays showing the human ships. Humanity has been studying warfare for our entire history. We know how to fight efficiently and how to win quickly. We do not waste 200 years accomplishing nothing. Science. Officer Rodriguez spoke for the first time since the alarms began. Commander Vexthela, our analysis of your conflict shows that all 3 powers in this region are technologically stagnant. You have advanced individual systems, but you have forgotten how to innovate or adapt. Lieutenant Commander Park added, your species relies on overwhelming firepower and heavy armor. But modern warfare is about speed, deception, and precision strikes. Size and strength mean nothing if you cannot hit your target. Vexthela looked around the room desperately. This is madness. Even if your ships are more advanced than they appeared, you only have a dozen vessels. We have hundreds of ships throughout this system and thousands more throughout the Confederation. Jun smiled again, that cold expression that was becoming familiar. Commander, how many human ships do you think are really in this system? 12. We counted them as they arrived. Look again. Chun touched her datapad, and the tactical displays updated with new information. Suddenly, the system was full of human ships. Dozens of vessels that had been completely invisible were now showing on the sensors. They surrounded every Zephyrian position and covered every possible escape route. 47 ships, Chun announced, all equipped with stealth technology. That makes them invisible to your sensors. They have been here for 3 days, studying your fleet and preparing for this moment. Cretan stared at the display in horror. How is this possible? Our sensors should have detected them. Your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect, Rodriguez explained. Human stealth technology is based on principles your science has not discovered yet. We can make our ships appear to be anything we want or make them disappear entirely. Jun walked over to stand directly in front of Vexthela. But the real question, Commander, is not how many ships we have here. The real question is what Terra plans to do with this region of space. What do you mean? Humanity is expanding. Into the galaxy, Commander? We need new worlds, new resources, and new territories for our growing population. This region of space has what we need. Vexthela felt a cold fear growing in her chest. You want to conquer us. Conquer? No, Commander. Conquest implies that we see you as equals worth fighting. What we want is for you to get out of our way. Chun turned to address the other Zephyrian officers who had gathered in the meeting chamber. The Terran Colonial Government has concluded that the current political situation in this region is unstable and inefficient. 3 powers fighting endless wars, millions of casualties, no progress for centuries. It is a waste of valuable space and resources. She paused to let that sink in. Terra is prepared to bring order and efficiency to this region. Worlds that cooperate with human expansion will be allowed to maintain their local governments and cultures. Worlds that resist will be pacified and placed under direct human administration. You cannot do this, Vexthela protested. There are laws, treaties, galactic accords that prevent one species from conquering others. Chun laughed again. Laws? Commander, you just spent 2 days trying to trick us into signing a treaty that would have made humanity your slaves. You have no moral authority to lecture us about laws. She gestured toward the tactical display. Besides, who is going to stop us? Your fleet, the hegemony, the collective? All three of your powers combined could not match what humanity can deploy? In this region, Intelligence Specialist Hayes spoke up for the first time. Commander, Terra has been preparing for galactic expansion for over 50 years. We have built fleets specifically designed to defeat the type of warfare practiced by local powers. Your ships are large and impressive, but they are also slow and vulnerable. Our shield technology alone makes most of your weapons ineffective, Park added. And our kinetic weapons can penetrate any armor you possess. Chun nodded. The era of massive ship-to-ship battles is over, Commander. Modern warfare is about information, speed, and precision. Humanity learned that lesson centuries ago. Vextela tried one last desperate argument. Even if you can defeat our fleets, you cannot govern hundreds of worlds with different species and cultures. The logistics alone would be impossible. Who said anything about governing? Chun asked. Commander, Terra is not interested in ruling over alien populations. We want the planets, the resources, and the strategic positions. What happens to the aliens currently living on those worlds is up to them. She walked over to the star chart on the meeting table. Species that cooperate with human expansion can remain on their worlds as autonomous populations. They can keep their governments, their cultures, and their ways of life. All we ask is that they stay out of our way and provide reasonable access to planetary resources. And if they refuse? Chun's expression hardened. Then they can find somewhere else to live. The galaxy is a big place, Commander. There are plenty of uninhabited worlds for species that do not want to coexist with humanity. The meeting chamber fell silent except for the continued wailing of alarms from the bridge. Vextela stared at the human captain, finally understanding the true scope of what was happening. You planned this from the beginning, she said quietly. The innocent first contact, the diplomatic meetings, the protection treaty discussions, it was all a lie? Not a lie, Chun corrected. Intelligence gathering. We needed to understand how your species thinks, how your military operates, and how you would react to various scenarios. You provided us with all the information we needed. She gestured to her officers. Lieutenant Commander Park learned about your fleet compositions and defensive strategies. Science Officer Rodriguez analyzed your technology and identified its weaknesses. Intelligence Specialist Hayes studied your political structure and communication systems, and I, Chun concluded, evaluated your leadership and decision-making processes. I must say, Commander, the results were disappointing. Vextela felt anger rising above her fear. You used us? You pretended to be primitive seeking help, and we trusted you. You trusted us because you are arrogant, Chun replied bluntly. You assumed that any species with less advanced ships must be inferior in every way. You never considered that we might be deliberately hiding our capabilities. She walked toward the door of the meeting chamber. That arrogance is why your species has been fighting pointless wars for 2 centuries. You cannot adapt, you cannot innovate, and you cannot learn from your mistakes. As Chun reached the door, she turned back to face Vextela one last time. Commander, I am going to return to my ship now. You have 1 hour to contact your superiors and inform them of the new situation. What new situation? The Kepler 442 system is now under human control? Any Zephyrian vessel that attempts to leave without permission will be destroyed. Any vessel that powers up weapons will be destroyed. Any vessel that tries to send messages outside the system will be destroyed, Chun paused. Your choices are simple, Commander. Surrender your fleet and prepare to negotiate the terms of Zephyrian withdrawal from this region, or watch your ships burn one by one until you change your mind. You would murder thousands of beings just to steal our territory? Chun's expression never changed. Commander, Terra did not start this conflict. Your species did, the moment you decided that humanity should become your slaves. We are simply finishing it. She activated her communicator. Indomitable, this is Captain Chun. Prepare to return to the ship. The diplomatic phase of this operation is now complete. As the humans prepared to leave, Chun delivered one final message. Commander. Vextela, I suggest you use the next hour wisely. Contact your fleet commanders, your government, and anyone else who needs to understand what is happening here. She smiled that cold smile one last time. Because in exactly 60 minutes, the Terran colonial fleet is going to demonstrate what happens when primitive aliens threaten humanity. The door closed behind the humans, leaving the Zephyrian officers alone with their fear, their shock, and the terrible realization that everything they thought they knew about the galaxy had just changed forever. Commander Vextela stood alone on the bridge of the Sovereign's Will, watching the countdown timer on her main display. 53 minutes and 20 seconds remained until the human deadline expired. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically. At their stations, trying to make sense of a situation that had become a nightmare, the tactical display showed the true scope of the human fleet. 47 warships surrounded the Zephyrian forces in a perfect sphere of death. Every escape route was blocked. Every defensive position was covered by multiple firing angles. The humans had turned the Kepler 442 system into a trap, and the Zephyrians were caught in the center of it. "Communications Officer Revan," Vextela called out, her voice hoarse from stress. "Any response from Fleet Command?" Revan looked up from her console, her face pale with worry. "No, Commander. The humans are jamming all long-range communications. Our messages are not getting through." "What about the other ships in our fleet?" "Local communications are working, but barely. The human jamming is very sophisticated. They are allowing us to talk to each other, but preventing any contact with the outside galaxy." Vextela nodded grimly. Even the jamming showed how advanced human technology really was. The Zephyrians had always thought their communication systems were among the best in the galaxy, but the humans were controlling them like children playing with toys. Captain Mordic of the heavy cruiser Righteous Fury appeared on the main communication screen. He was a veteran officer with decades of combat experience, but today he looked old and frightened. "Commander," he said urgently, "my tactical officers have been analyzing the human fleet. The situation is worse than we thought." "How much worse?" "Those ships are not just advanced, they are revolutionary. Our computers cannot even identify half of their weapon systems. The energy readings suggest they have firepower levels we have never seen before." Captain Zilara of the destroyer Swift Strike joined the communication channel. "Commander, my science officer has been trying to scan the human vessels. Their hulls appear to be made of materials that do not exist in our databases, and their shield technology is completely unknown." "What are you saying?" Vextela asked, though she already feared the answer. "We are saying that if we fight these humans, we will lose," Mordic replied bluntly. "Not just this battle, but every ship in the fleet. They will destroy us completely." Vextela closed her eyes for a moment, trying to think clearly despite the panic that was threatening to overwhelm her. She had been a naval officer for 30 years. She had fought pirates, raiders, and enemy fleets. But she had never faced anything like this. "What about our allies?" she asked. "Can we contact the hegemony or the collective?" "Even if we could reach them," Zilara said sadly, "what would we tell them? That a primitive species has somehow developed technology centuries ahead of ours? That 47 unknown ships are threatening to destroy our entire fleet? They would think we had gone insane." The timer on the display continued counting down. 47 minutes and 15 seconds. Meanwhile, aboard the TCS Indomitable, Captain Sarah Chun stood in the ship's combat information center, watching her own tactical displays. The Zephyrian fleet was exactly where her intelligence officers had predicted it would be. Grouped in a defensive formation around their flagship, weapons powered but not targeted, shields raised but not at full strength. "Status report," Chun ordered. Lieutenant Commander Park consulted his tactical board. "All ships report ready for combat operations. Weapon systems are armed and targeting solutions are locked. Stealth systems are functioning normally." "Any movement from the Zephyrian fleet?" "Negative. They appear to be holding position and attempting long-range communications. All outgoing messages are being intercepted and blocked." Chun nodded. The Zephyrians were behaving exactly as her psychologists had predicted. When faced with overwhelming force, they would try to call for help rather than take decisive action. It was another sign of their military weakness. Science Officer Rodriguez looked up from her instruments. "Captain, I am detecting increased energy readings from several Zephyrian vessels. It appears they are powering up additional weapon systems. Are they preparing to attack? Unknown. The energy increase is consistent with either offensive preparations or defensive posturing." Chun considered the situation. The Zephyrians were probably just trying to look threatening while they figured out what to do. But there was always a chance that one of their commanders might do something stupid. "Send a message to the Zephyrian flagship," she ordered. "Remind them that any hostile action will result in the immediate destruction of their entire fleet." On the Sovereign's will, Communications Officer Revan received the human transmission and played it for the bridge crew. The voice was calm and professional, but the words were terrifying. "Zephyrian vessels, this is Captain Chen of the Terran Colonial Fleet. We have detected increased energy readings from your ships. Any vessel that continues to power up weapon systems will be considered hostile and will be destroyed. You have been warned." Vex Thala immediately ordered all ships to reduce their weapon power to minimum levels. She could not afford to give the humans any excuse to open fire. The timer continued counting down. 35 minutes and 43 seconds. "Commander," Tactical Analyst Cretan called out from his station, "I have been studying the human ship formations. I think I understand their strategy. Explain." Cretan activated a holographic display that showed the positions of all ships in the system. "The humans are not just surrounding us randomly. They have positioned their vessels to create overlapping fields of fire that would prevent any of our ships from escaping or providing mutual support." He highlighted several human ships with red markers. These vessels appear to be specialized for different types of combat. Some are optimized for long-range bombardment, others for close-range fighting, and still others for anti-fighter operations. What does that mean for us? It means they have planned this battle down to the smallest detail. Every one of our ships is covered by the optimal human vessel for destroying it. If we fight, we will not just lose, we will be slaughtered. The bridge fell silent except for the humming of machinery and the beeping of countdown timers. Everyone understood what Crichton was saying. The humans had not just brought superior technology to this battle. They had brought superior strategy, superior tactics, and superior planning. 20-8 minutes and 17 seconds remained, Captain. Cheon checked her chronometer and opened a communication channel to the entire Terran fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Chun. Prepare for combat operations. We will commence firing in exactly 28 minutes unless the enemy surrenders." She had promoted herself to Admiral for the purposes of this operation. The Zephyrians needed to understand that they were not dealing with a single ship captain, but with the full authority of the Terran colonial government. Throughout the human fleet, weapon systems hummed to life. Particle cannons that could punch through any known armor began charging their capacitors. Kinetic accelerators loaded projectiles that would strike targets at significant fractions of light speed. Missile tubes filled with warheads containing exotic matter explosives, the TCS Retribution, disguised as a merchant vessel until 30 minutes ago, was actually a heavy battleship carrying humanity's most advanced weapons. Its main gun was a relativistic kill vehicle launcher that could accelerate projectiles to 30% of light speed. A single shot from that weapon could destroy a Zephyrian dreadnought. The TCS Vengeance had been pretending to be a research ship, but it was really a missile cruiser carrying over 200 long-range torpedoes. Each torpedo had its own guidance system and enough explosive power to level a city. Smaller human vessels carried swarms of fighter drones, electronic warfare systems, and point defense weapons that could shoot down incoming projectiles with perfect accuracy. The Zephyrian fleet, impressive as it looked, was completely outmatched. 15 minutes and 32 seconds. "Commander," Captain Mordic's voice came through the communication system again. "We cannot win this battle. We need to surrender." "Surrender?" Vextala was horrified by the suggestion. We are the Zephyrian Confederation Navy. We do not surrender to primitives. These are not primitives, Captain Zellera pointed out. We were wrong about everything. These humans are more advanced than any species in the galaxy. If we surrender, what happens to our crews, our ships, our colonies? I do not know, Mordic admitted. But if we fight, we all die. At least if we surrender, some of us might survive. Vexthala looked around her bridge at the officers and crew who had served with her for years. These were good beings who trusted her to make the right decisions. Did she have the right to order them to die in a hopeless battle? 10 minutes and 8 seconds. On the Indomitable, Chang received a priority message from Terra Command. She read it quickly, then smiled with satisfaction. Lieutenant Commander Park, she called out, signal all ships. Terra Command has authorized us to proceed with Phase 2 of the operation. What is Phase 2, Admiral? Complete pacification of this region of space. The Kepler 442 system is just the beginning. Once we secure the Zephyrian fleet, we will move on to their major worlds and military bases. Chun activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. You are now witnessing the opening action of humanity's expansion into this region of the galaxy. What happens here today will determine whether that expansion is peaceful or violent. She paused, then continued in a voice that carried across space to every ship in both fleets. The age of alien dominance in. This region is over. The age of humanity has begun. 5 minutes and 44 seconds. Aboard the Sovereign's Will, Vexthala made her decision. She could not save her fleet, but perhaps she could save her crews. Open a channel to the human flagship, she ordered. Channel open, Commander. Vexthala took a deep breath and spoke. The words that would end her career and change the history of the galaxy. Captain Chun, this is Commander Vexthala of the Zephyrian Confederation. We surrender our fleet to human authority. The countdown timer stopped with 3 minutes and 17 seconds remaining. Chun's voice came back immediately, cold and professional. Commander Vexthala, I accept your surrender. Order all Zephyrian vessels to power down weapons and shields immediately. Prepare to receive boarding parties. Boarding parties? Human Marines will be taking control of your ships to ensure compliance with surrender terms. Any resistance will result in the destruction of the resisting vessel. Vexthala looked around her bridge one last time. Her officers stared back at her with expressions of defeat and despair. The Zephyrian Confederation had ruled this region of space for over 300 years. Today, that rule had come to an end. All ships, she announced over the fleet communication system, power down weapons and shields. Prepare to be boarded. Anyone who resists will be responsible for the deaths of their entire crew. One by one, the Zephyrian ships went dark. Their weapons powered down, their shields collapsed, and their engines went into standby mode. The once proud fleet became a collection of helpless metal hulks floating in space. Human boarding shuttles launched from the Terran Warships, carrying Marine units to secure each Zephyrian vessel. The Marines were equipped with advanced armor and weapons that made them nearly invincible against conventional resistance. Captain Chun opened a final communication channel to the defeated Zephyrian fleet. Commander Vexthala, the Kepler 442. System is now under the control of the Terran colonial government. Your ships will be escorted to a secure location where you and your crews will be processed as prisoners of war. She paused, then added, I want you to send a message to your government and your allies. Tell them that humanity has arrived in this region of space. Tell them that the old order is finished. And tell them that any species that opposes human expansion will face the same fate as your fleet. The communication channel closed, leaving the Zephyrians alone with their defeat. Later, as human Marines secured the last of the alien ships, Chun sent her final report to Terra Command. Mission accomplished. Zephyrian fleet neutralized with 0 human casualties. Local resistance eliminated. Kepler 442 system secured for human colonization. Ready to proceed with conquest of remaining Zephyrian territories. She looked out at the stars, thinking about the dozens of human fleets that were already moving toward other alien worlds. The hegemony of Keth and the Crystalline Collective would be next, followed by every other power in this region of the galaxy. Today had been just the beginning. Tomorrow, the real war would start. And when it was over, this entire region of space would belong to humanity. The age of human expansion had begun, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same.